what being a business owner is about a lot of the time, especially when you're first starting off, is you're spinning the plates and you're like, oh crap, that one's about to fall. I got to run over there and spin it. And it's get the work, do the work. Oh no, I got to get the work again, do the work, get the work, do the work. And it's this seesaw, and then saying, okay, how do I get myself out of this loop? Well, hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Business Brains and BS podcast. I am joined by my co-host, Greg Sutmiller here. And today we are going to talk about something that is near and dear to everyone's heart, especially if you own a business. And that is money, right? We got the Jerry Maguire, show me the money. And we're going to talk about how the 4 ways that you make money in your business. So we're going to talk about how you make money basically working for it, working in it, working on it, and then make money from it. And Greg, I know you and I, when we were talking about what are some of the topics we wanted to discuss, this was one that was near and dear to your heart because, you said this is actually the kind of the process that you're working through. So I think as we start to talk about this, probably be first and foremost best to define what we mean by this. So when I say working for the business, so making money working for the business, I'm talking about being the actual technician in the business, right? This is where if you're the auto mechanic, you're turning the wrench, you're on the tools, if you don't go to work and go, take care of things, then money is not coming in, right? So this is where you're really the technician, the administration, everything is really kind of coming through you. So then we take the step from working for it to working in it. All right. So now this is really where you're more in the managerial role, right? So you're coordinating things, you're kind of reactive and tactical, if you will. Okay. Then we move to working on the business. Now this is really more kind of the CEO package, if you will. So you're still pulling a salary from the business, but you're also taking pay for your performance. It's really all about being proactive and strategic at this point. And then ultimately you're making money from the business. So this is where it really is more passive, right? You're getting dividends. You don't have to be there, kind of the Richard Branson type of tie into it. For those of you who might be younger and don't know who Sir Richard Branson is, he owns over 400 companies, and he does and he manages them all about 2 hours a day from an iPad from a hammock somewhere in the world. So, Greg, as I'm talking through this, why don't we talk a little bit? Let's just kind of start off talking a little bit about what your experience was like when it was just you or you and one other employee, and you were making money by working for the business. And what was that experience?
Yeah,
like?
starting out, I just started by myself, and I'm a therapist, so I just decided to do my own private practice and thinking about, those kind of different roles. I was trying to, I would say, do the first 3 all at the same time. I have to very much work for the business. I'm seeing clients, I have a full caseload, and, I need that revenue because otherwise no bills are getting paid. And even when I first started adding other therapists, I still had to do that. I still had to keep a full caseload and to keep everything going. But, for example, if I add another therapist, I need them to get clients. So I have to work on that too. If all I do is sit in my office and see people, we're not doing any marketing, things like that. So, and then there's managing things. And as they grow, there's more to manage. And I've tried to hit all these things along the way. But what I've noticed in my own experience as a business owner is, like I said, I started out working for the business most of the time. I would come in on Saturdays and do a lot of working, in and on the business on the weekend, and, over time, there was a period where, I would start seeing less people, but then if money got kind of tight, I'm like, well, I got to see more people. I got to bump up my caseload again. What was I thinking? Not thinking I could go down to, however many hours a week. I got to bump it back up. But then as we continued to grow, I noticed, one, there's just so much more managerial type things to do that I have to have time to do that
Mhm.
or everything starts to crumble. And then we got to a point where I realized if money is tight, me adding an extra 5 hours of therapy a week or 10 hours of therapy a week isn't enough. Like it doesn't even make sense. The math doesn't add up anymore. The thing that's going to help the business is getting clients for all these other therapists on my team and making sure that our systems are running smoothly so that we're getting paid and everything else for those sessions. So that was a real shift. Um how do I build up other people, build up the business, not build up my caseload? And so it's been an evolving process, but it has not always been easy for a number of reasons. One of the struggles I've had, and I really would like your feedback on this, is I always tell myself I don't ever want to be the business owner who forgets what it's like to be boots on the ground, who forgets how the job actually works. Because I've seen that in my career where people kind of in upper management, up into the ownership, they're licensed therapists, like they have a piece of paper, but they haven't seen a client in 10 years or more, and they don't know how to do a lot of the day-to-day stuff. They can't effectively use the electronic health record that we all use because they don't see clients, or maybe they know how to run some reports, but there's a lot of the day-to-day stuff they don't know how to do. They're out of practice on their therapy. So I've always thought like, I don't want to get to that point where I'm leading other people, trying to get them to do a job that I don't even remember how to do anymore myself. What is your thought on that?
Well, I think that's an interesting question because I got a couple of thoughts that run through my head. So I remember when I was with Pfizer, I was a sales representative, and we had transitioned some technology, and we now had iPads that we were able to enter our sales calls in. And my manager was with me, and he wanted to enter my calls for me, and he wanted me to walk him through how to do that. And while I appreciated him wanting to do that, it slowed me down, right? It really put a kink in the day, and then I started thinking about, what my time in the military. The general or the colonel didn't come to the engagement control station, which is what we used for the Patriot missile, and sit in there and fight air battles because that wasn't really their job anymore, right? Now, if it's something that you still really love to do, if you still want to work with people, work with a couple of clients here and there, just because it's something you love doing, that's fine. But staying at that level just for the sake of staying at that level, I don't think that helps you move forward. And I don't think it helps the business move forward. I think what's probably kind of as I'm thinking through this, more important here is what's the culture of your business? What's the culture that you're trying to create, right? Because if you've got a culture of open, transparent communication where people can share things with you, challenges that they're having with the HR program or whatever it is, you can still be a problem solver for them without having to be right there, boots on the ground in the mud, right? So again, I think it goes back to what do you like doing and what are you trying to accomplish? Because if you still get a great sense of satisfaction out of working with, maybe you keep five clients a week or something like that just to keep the saw sharp, that's fantastic. At the same time, if your goal here is to build this practice to, we got 20 locations throughout Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Kansas. Those three states touch, right? Yeah. And you're working toward that, then worrying about how to make sure that something's properly coded for billing in the EHR is probably not going to be a priority unless your people are doing it wrong and you're not getting.
Yeah. So what you were just saying ties into another one of the things that pops up for me. Hopefully this doesn't make me sound too, I don't know, big headed or whatever, but like I built the business on my reputation as a therapist. That's how we got started. I think I'm pretty good at that role. I think I'm a pretty good therapist. And so there's some street cred is that kind of how I think of it involved, and that has transitioned over time to not only having a reputation as a good therapist, but then, people like working for me, I think a lot of the time. Like So now I have a reputation as being someone who's good to work for. Um, and so I really like that. But part of why I think I have that reputation as someone who's good to work for ties back to that, like, being a good therapist. Like, this guy gets it, um, now there's more to it than that, obviously. Um, and obviously I do have to manage people, so it's not just all about doing therapy. And my caseload these days is, it's the smallest it's ever been. Most of my time is in those other categories these days. But there's that part of it too. It's like, maybe it's ego or whatever, but again, I think of it as like street cred. I got to maintain that street cred, as a therapist.
Well, and I think you can actually use that street cred to your advantage, because if you think about it, if you have that reputation, and you are now coaching, training, directing multiple therapists under you, making them better, right? Now I want to send my patients to Evolution Mental Health, because I don't just have Greg. I have Greg and all of his, all of the therapists he's had an impact on. And you can still spend time with those therapists who are working with you, working through some of their challenging cases, right? So it still gives you that boots on the ground, street cred, keeps the saw sharp. It's kind of like, if you look at the NFL or college coaching and you see the coaching trees, right? Who is the great coach who spawned off all these other amazing coaches underneath them? Or think about John Maxwell, right? If John Maxwell said, I'm just going to stay as a leadership consultant and I'm just going to work with one or two, three organizations at a time, he couldn't have had nearly the impact that he's had now by having, the books and the Maxwell certified coaches and all of those different things. So now he's able to take what he's built and spread it across, right? Which really then turns back into what we're talking about, right? Making money from the business, right? So that ultimate goal. And I think as you were talking, as we started out, you gave me an image of the guy on stage with the spinning plates, right? And that really is what being a business owner is about a lot of the time, especially when you're first starting off, is you're spinning the plates and you're like, oh crap, that one's about to fall. I got to run over there and spin it. And it's get the work, do the work. Oh no, I got to get the work again, do the work, get the work, do the work. And it's this seesaw, and then saying, okay, how do I get myself out of this loop? And I don't know how many of our readers, or excuse me, how many of our listeners or viewers have read this. I know you have. The
Mhm.
E-Myth Revisited is a
Mhm.
great book for people to dig into to help with this, right? And as you were talking, I was thinking about one of the things I recommend, and it's when you're the technician, go ahead and start building your systems out then, right? Start documenting what you're doing so that when it's time to bring somebody on, you've already done most of the work and you've done it the way that it's supposed to be done. So you can coach people and train them up to the expectation and the standard that you want in your business, right? Because that's another thing that business owners run into as a challenge as far as growing their business, is that fear of letting go, right? No one else can do it as well as I can. And what I tend to see when that happens is business owners think that they're delegating, but they're actually abdicating, right? So it's basically me saying, okay, here you go, Greg. This is your responsibility now. You do this.
Mm.
Good luck. Versus here's very, very clear expectations. This is what good looks like. I'm going to train you. I'm going to be available. We're going to meet to see the progress that you're making. How well do you do this? How well do you understand this? And we're going to crawl, walk, run. And then I'm going to have some set of accountability to be able to check back in with you to make sure you're doing it and you're doing it to that expectation, right? And I think that's why we see so many business owners say, well, no one else can do it as well as I can. It's because they didn't really give the person they were handing it off to a really good chance of success. And the thought process is, if you can hand something in your business off to somebody else and they can do it at least as 80%, even if they can do it 60% as well as you initially, they're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep getting better at it. And ultimately, there's a better than average chance. And most business owners don't want to hear this because they don't want to admit that somebody could be better than them. They're going to get to a point where they do it as well as or better than you. And that's how you start to grow your business, right? I remember when I got promoted with Pfizer to a hospital representative position, I was talking to my manager about the guy he was hiring to replace me. And he said, I've got to find somebody who's better than Eric Knam to fill this territory. And that was a punch in the gut, right? I'm like, better than Eric Knam? Who else is better than Eric? I built this territory up. It's a high performing territory now. And he looked at me and he said, the territory can never get better if I don't put somebody better than you in it now. And I thought that's a really, really interesting point. And as the business grows, the people you start with aren't necessarily going to stay with you, right? Sometimes the business outgrows the personnel. And when that happens, you've got to be looking to upgrade in that role as people leave, right? And systems and processes and culture are going to be a big, big part of that.
Man, you've made me think about several different things. We'll see if we have time to get to them. The first thing I thought about when you were talking is my old boss, her name was Maureen. When I first got into like upper level management, I was taking her place. She was the clinical director at this agency that I was at. She was leaving and I was taking her spot. And one thing she told me that was really helpful, she had a piece of paper with 3 columns and a bunch of stuff written in the columns. She said, on this paper is everything I do or could do. And she had the 3 columns were, column A was things anyone could do. Anyone that works here could do this. Column B was things any therapist could do. So specific to that therapist role. Column C was things only I can do. And she told me, you got to spend your time in column C. If you get sucked into columns A and B, you'll never succeed. And that was very helpful. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about now is, there are plenty of things, the delegating, and like you said, I do, I train a lot of therapists. I work with new therapists and as well as, seasoned experienced therapists. And I bring on the seasoned experienced therapists because they're already good at what they do. And as I'm training up the newer therapists, yeah, I want them to be really good. I don't want them to always struggle and be in my shadow or anything like that. I want them to stand out and be skilled and well respected on their own. So it makes everything you're saying there makes total sense for sure. So remember in column C, the things only I can do. That's where you gotta spend your time. So it's really helpful.
Well, yeah, I think as business owners, initially we start off trading time for money, right? That's how we build our business is we trade our time for money. And then we want to grow the business to a point that we can then trade money for time, right? And that's where we start bringing people on. And we kind of started off talking about, get the business, do the business, get the business, do the business. And yeah, I don't remember if it was in action coach training or where it was that I was introduced to the concept that each and every one of us who's a business owner owns a sales and marketing company that does X, right? So Greg, you own a sales and marketing company that does, counseling, mental health stuff. I own a sales and marketing company that does business coaching. And when we can realize that that's really, really the lifeblood of it is figuring out when we're in that for it and in it to say, okay, I've got to figure out what my marketing looks like. I've got to figure out what's my lead generation look like? What are the things that I'm doing that are bringing in the right folks? And I can remember, you and I, when it was just you and a couple of people figuring out, okay, how do we get it to be where people are sending more and more and more? And you've found strategic partners. I know you said that the internet and some of your certifications and some of your listings are how patients find you. And it's so important for business owners to know that and to understand where are my future clients coming from, right? And then being able to say, are those those streams that are leading into my funnel, are they bringing me the right types of clients too, right? Because you may have people coming in, my pipeline's full, but it's not my ideal client. So I've got to figure out where is that coming from? Is it my messaging that's wrong, or is that a stream that I need to just go ahead and dam off and focus my talents and my resources somewhere else? Because you're not going to be able to grow the business if you can't have a consistent cash flow and consistent revenue, right? Because not only consistent revenue, but consistent profit too. Because we always joke, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity. But if you don't know where your money's coming from, you don't know where your clients are coming from, you don't know what you're doing to get them on board and keep them on board, then you're going to have a hard time scaling like you have. I mean, like you have scaled, not like you've had a hard time. I mean, you've done really well. You're at what, 2 locations now? And how many therapists?
16, I think. And then we're gonna open a third location at the beginning of the year. So that's exciting. But yeah, yeah, I remember that lesson, you own a marketing company and what you market is counseling. Yeah. And then of course the systems, like you said, like it's not enough to just go out and market. You got to know what works and what doesn't. You know, the ones that work well, go back to the well on those. Um, so that requires tracking and keeping tabs and all that, which again is more, that working like on the business as opposed to for the business. You said something a while ago, the difference between delegating and abdicating, I think is the way you put it. And, I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday about that very thing. I had delegated, somebody that had experience that, started off doing well but then as things have kind of grown lately, had a little bit of struggle. And I was, kind of think through the problem, and I realized part of this is on me because I just had kind of handed it off and we're like, all right, you got this, and hadn't kept tabs. And so if I had been keeping tabs, we could have sewn up some of these things before now. And that really brought a couple things to light. One, just that importance of monitoring everything, you know, even if it's going well, keep track of it, know why it's going well. But then two, back to what we were originally talking about, I also found myself thinking, this is why I need a smaller caseload. So I have more time to keep up with this sort of thing, you know? Um, so yeah, it's the delegating is one thing, but you can't just be absent-minded about it.
Well, and I think that's where, systems and processes and automation come in too, right? Because if you have some type of an easy to read dashboard that have the important things in your business, they talk about the book, Measure What Matters, right? And there are some coaches out there who want you to measure everything. I just want people to measure the things that matter in their business and then look at them, right? Because it's like having, if you are a pilot, you've got all of these instruments that are telling you what's your airspeed, what's your airspeed, what's your altitude, right? What's your heading? Those are all very important things that you need to know as a pilot in order to, number one, get where you want to go, and number two, actually make it to that spot, right? Same thing with your business. If you don't have a dashboard where you're looking at what's your cash flow look like? Are you looking at your profit and loss statement? Are you looking at your client retention rate? Are you looking at your conversion rate? All of those things are things that you need to be able to look at to say, is the business healthy, or am I seeing some red flags here that are causing me to say we need to go and take a look and tweak some things, right? So being able to peel kind of peel the sheet back and look and say, okay, lift the hood, I guess would be a better analogy, and see how's the engine running. And I love what you said just now about, part of this falls on me, because a lot of times as leaders and business owners, we don't do a good enough job of that. And I think it was in Good to Great, he talks about when things are going well, a good leader looks out the window. And when things aren't going well, a good leader looks in the mirror. So I think that's a testimonial to you and the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Have I done everything that I could have done in order to make this person successful, right? Have I done everything I could have done to make sure that this job is getting done to the standard and the expectation? And then when you get to a point where you say, yeah, there's nothing else I could have done, then we start looking at the person saying, okay, is this an issue of competence or commitment? And when that happens, I think we need to look at the task too, because as you were talking about that, you were saying, some things have changed. And there's I think it was Peter Drucker, maybe, I don't remember, the concept of situational leadership. And situational leadership is all about the task that the person is taking on. So you talked about, okay, I brought on an experienced therapist, right? So we would look at the therapist and say, well, they know what they're doing, right? Well, yes, they know what they're doing when they're dealing with therapy. But if you brought on a new electronic medical record that they had no experience with, that person suddenly goes down to level zero as far as their ability with that, right? So you've got to look at, does the person have experience with the task or not? And then what kind of behaviors do I need to have with them, right? So it may be very directive up front when they don't have any experience. And whenever I brought a new sales representative on with Pfizer, I I knew they didn't know anything, but they were like that puppy that you just adopted, right? They were just so excited and tail wagging, and I didn't need to give them a treat all the time, right? Because they were just ready to go run through the door. So it was okay, very directive. Let's go make this happen. But then as they started to get into the job of making sales calls, they realized, wow, this is a little harder than I thought it was going to be. It kind of, little disillusion stepped in there. So I still needed to be directive with that person, but then I needed to provide more supportive behaviors in there, right? Encouraging them, helping them set goals, helping them move forward. Then as they got better at it, they still weren't fully competent, but they started to be able to take a little bit more, more of the role on without me having to be as involved. So I could back off the directive a little bit more and be supportive. And then ultimately the goal is for them to get to a place where they could teach, right? So a position like what we're talking about with you, where you now are bringing on these therapists, you're coaching them, you're helping them. And then the really cool thing about that is then you're able to enlist those people that you've helped. You enlist them to help the next generation and the next generation. So now you've duplicated yourself, and that helps you take that business to a point where, right, I got the right people in the right places, running the right systems, and this business is really kind of autonomous and doing its own thing without me having to be in the middle of it all the time.
Absolutely. Something my dad shared with me years ago when I was kind of first getting into the managerial side of things. He said, you need to always be raising up your replacement. And I've always remembered that. And I think that ties into what you're talking about right now.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And that's, something that we think about too, as you're thinking about getting from a point where you're working for it to where, you're making money working for it to a point where you're making money from it, is what does that succession plan look like? And a lot of business owners, if you'll talk to them, they don't have a retirement savings per se, right? Their plan is the business is going to be my retirement. And you've got to think, okay, what does that look like? Are you planning to grow this thing to a point that you're going to sell it? Do you understand how all that works? Most of the time, you just kind of on average, you're looking at probably a 3.5 times multiple on your profits, right? You got to look at, am I selling a business? Am I selling somebody a job? Right? Because if I'm still in the middle of the business and somebody's going to come buy it, then I'm selling them a job. Or am I selling them a business where they don't have to be there all the time? So one of the things that I've talked with business owners about is figuring out, what does that look like? Do you want to build it to a point that you're just getting mailbox money consistently? Do you want to build it to a point you're going to sell it? If you're going to sell it, could you potentially sell it to your general manager, right? Or somebody who's currently working for the business? Or do you want to go out, put it out on the market somewhere and have some stranger come buy it and take it over? So I think it's really important. It's like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. What does your business look like when it's done, right? So what does your business look like when it's done, Greg? Where do you see it going?
Continually changes. It's in a good way. Like it evolves, it's gets bigger, not smaller. So I think that's probably a positive. So, what you said, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, to begin with the end in mind. When I think about that, I think about more in the sense of what I want for myself versus what the business look like. And then, so I've been approaching it, and maybe this is wrong. Like, I'm just telling you how I've been approaching it. What I want for myself at the end of the day, and then how do I tailor a business that's going to meet that need or that want for myself? So it sounds like maybe I need to do a little better job of defining, well, what would that be? Like that business that's going to give me what I want when I decide to hang up my spurs, so to speak, what is that going to look like?
Right. Well, and the nice thing for you is you've built it to a point now that if somebody came in to buy it, they could buy it knowing that they have 16 therapists working for them, right? So it's not like, if I own a barber shop and I'm the only barber and I put it up for sale, it's really not going to be worth anything other than the chair and the combs and the scissors and the clippers, right? Because I can go in there, everybody can come in once, not like the way that I cut their hair, and they leave. But if I own a salon and I've got 12 chairs with 12 stylists who all have their clientele, then that's going to be a much better investment for somebody as if they're looking to
Yeah,
buy a
absolutely.
business. But I think going back to what you just said, as far as, what's the life that you want, I think that's really, really important, right? I think that we all start our business with this vision of, this is what being a business owner is going to be. I'm going to have money to have experiences and to buy the things that I want. I'm going to have the free time to be able to go out and, go play golf on a Wednesday afternoon at 2 o'clock if I want, or take a 2 week, 2 month, 2 year vacation to, wherever. Um, but then we get caught in the middle of it and we end up in that making money from it, working for it, and we get stuck there. So I think a big part of where I'm kind of going here is, as you continue to build that business and you have those personal goals, I think you also have to have goals for the business that everybody who's working for the business subscribes to, right? Because if your goal is, I want to have a yacht out on Grand Lake, well, that's great, but that's not going to motivate me as one of your therapists, right? So what is a goal that you can set within the organization that I, as one of your therapists, can say, yeah, you know what, I can get on board with that, and that'll help pull the organization forward, help it grow, right? Still give you the life that you want to have, but also help the organization continue to move
Yeah,
forward.
yeah, that's definitely right. Yeah, they gotta
Yeah, yeah,
be able to
that's
buy into that,
definitely
and so, yeah, I'm like, "You all gotta get me that yacht." That's never gonna fly. Uh, so, yeah, that's a really good point.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'll show you a picture of it. Yeah.
yeah. So, Eric, you work with a lot of business owners, I'm sure you see all different types. How common would you say this struggle is, this getting out of working for the business into working in and then on, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, it's very common. And I think the reason for that is because a lot of times the business owners know where they want to go. They just don't know how to get there, or they know what to do, but maybe stupid's getting in the way. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out our last episode. But it's very, very common for people to say, this is where I want to go. I'm just not quite sure how to get there. And I think one of the really cool things about what I do is it's an opportunity for me to have a conversation with business owners like you and say, what do you want your business to be? And I've had some people who've said, I want this to be multinational. And I've had some people who've said, I don't want to go any further than, Northeast Oklahoma. I'm happy with what I have. I just want to make it better. I want it to be something I can hand off to my kids. So again, I think it goes back to having that clarity of where it is that you want the business to go. And then what I help them do is put a plan together and say, okay, to get to the top of this mountain, we got to figure out where our camps are going to be along the way. And then we got to plan a route to get there. All right, now let's start taking the steps from where we are now at base camp to that first place where we're going to stop
Yeah,
and camp.
when you were saying that just now, it helped me realize, I think one of the reasons maybe I haven't clearly defined what the business looks like at the end is because for me, most of the joy, fulfillment, whatever that I get from owning this business is in the growth and the developing new strategies, new ideas, and the idea of putting a cap where, like, this is where we stop is kind of a bummer to me, you know? Um, I remember for one of my former employers, I got promoted to clinical director, which in that business was as high as I could go, unless they were going to make me part owner, which I was pretty sure they weren't. Um, this was it in the end of the line. And I was still relatively young. I was like, I think 35 at that time. And I remember sitting there in the CEO's office thinking, as they've just offered me the job and I've accepted, and I'm thinking, there's nowhere else to go. Like, this is it. What am I going to do this for another 30 years? That doesn't sound fun. So that, like, what does it look like at the end? It's kind of like, well, I don't want to put a cap on this. Like, the journey's where all the good stuff comes from. That's just me, like how I'm wired.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and that's probably a great topic for another one of our podcasts, is how business owners identify with the business and how it becomes such a part of their identity. And then when they do sell the business or step away from it, the struggles that they actually have, when they do that. But stay tuned. That'll be something Greg and I talk about coming down the pike. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Business Brains and BS podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, please make sure that you smash that like button. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, do yourself a favor, do us a favor, go ahead, click follow, and then leave us a review if you would. And we'd also love your comments and feedback on any other topics that you might like us to cover. So until next episode, we'll see you.